Hey everybody and welcome to the Makoreactor Meta Monday. I am Ghosty of Makoreactor, the creator, and today we're going to talk a little bit about meta again, because that's what Meta Monday is all about. Today, or I should say recently, the starter decks were released. Many people got them last week, several got them this week, and several has yet to find the starters. But what's happening anyway is that the starters will be legal eventually, and we'll see play in both OP tournaments and the regional tournaments, eventually even the national tournaments and even the worlds. It is going to impact the format as we know it, and a couple of the cards are really going to see a lot of play, I think, because there are some fantastic cards in these starters as usual. In the last starters, for example, the Jil Nabat still see a lot of play. The Pain and Riku still see a lot of play from the FF10 starters. The Serra from the FF13 starters see a lot of play. 7, we still see Jessie around. There are a lot of these cards actually seeing play, so the starters in Final Fantasy are actually pretty okay. So that is nice to see. So what we're going to talk about today is the Type 0 and Final Fantasy IX starter decks and their setups, but only a little bit about their setups, because everyone knows what the deck's contents are already. If you have the deck, you already know what's in it. It's not a big deal, and as you can see soon, the deck list is quite bad. So it's really gonna have to be improved a fair bit to actually see play or have a shot at winning at your locals. Improving the starter deck is a topic of today, and a little bit about the meta impact and what cards I expect are going to see play even outside of these sort of tribal or niche decks. The Class 0 especially, or I should say Type 0 deck, is very synergized. You need several of these Type 0 characters together to be able to fight, and most are kind of bad if you don't have several of them. They kind of need each other to show their true potential. So a lot of those forwards go straight down the bin when you're making a deck that isn't Type 0, but on the other hand, a couple are still good outside of that, so that's interesting. And the same with Category 9, but the Category 9 characters don't really have the same requirements. They work quite okay even outside of Category 9 decks, so just splashing a couple of Category 9 characters might be enough for it to work, so that is interesting indeed. Very nice that the Category 9 is a lot more integrated with the rest of the cards. But we're going to start with the Type 0. My favorites, as Lightning is the most disruptive element in my opinion. You can disrupt your opponent's plans, and this element simply does it best because Lightning does so many of the effects on the opposing side of the board. You don't only play to your win condition, you try to disrupt your opponent's win condition. And many elements, especially Wind for example, really lack this element, so that is why I think Wind might be well coupled with Lightning. So I think Wind and Lightning is going to see some play in the future, and this is definitely one of the ways to do it. We're gonna have to improve this deck a lot for it to see play. For example, this deck includes a lot of dead cards, 2 of 8 and 2 7s. 8 and 7 both have great special, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but there are only 2 of them here, so you're either going to have to stock out on Opus 3 when they arrive, or buy another Type 0 deck and split it with a friend. So you get like 3 of the important cards. Deuce is also a 2 of in this deck for some reason, and we get a lot of bad cards. For example, the Chocobos. The Ninja isn't so special in this deck in my opinion. The Evokers aren't very special. We get like 4 1-cost backups. The curve is way too low for that, and we get Dragoons and Ramu and Cyclops. Cyclops we're actually going to keep, because if we change the curve that's actually going to be quite nice. The backup Ninja is better, and the Dragoon once again. We're gonna have to change a lot of these cards. Overall though, very nice that we get 3 of all the starter cards. The starter cards unique for this set is the Ace, the light card in the bottom left, Moogle in the top left, and then Queen in the top right. So Queen, Moogle and Ace being the unique starter cards here, and 3 of each of those at the very least. So if you're buying Opus 3, you don't really need 2 of these, the starter pack. Though I've heard there might be unique arts for it, so it might be some collection value. Alright, so there was a lot of new forwards introduced in the new starter sets. Not all of these are unique for the starter set. It is also allowed to play the starter cards in many regionals a while after the release. I think it was something like 14 days after release. Overall, some of these cards are really powerful and are going to see a lot of play, but most are limited to Type 0 decks because they require a lot of Type 0 characters to actually become effective. All the same, some of these effects are incredible, and the amount of special, as you can see, 4 out of 6 of these cards have specials, and each of them are really powerful. I'm gonna butcher some of these names for you, so here we go. This is, the first card is Cise or Size or Cease, I don't know. Either way, it is a very nice card, and when she attacks, I think it's a she, can't really tell, I think it's a she, yeah. When she attacks, choose one of your opponent's forwards, and until the end of turn it loses 1k power for each job class 0 cadet character you control. This is also backups, and that is very interesting, and there are going to be at least like, you're probably going to play 2 or 3 backups that are job class 0 cadet, so that is going to be very nice. So when Caesar size attacks, she's going to reduce a card by a lot of power. So if they only have one big defender, for example, you can put it down to like a reasonable level. So overall, I think it's a fine card. As it's so cheap to play, it's going to be able to buff 9, for example. So for 2, you can play Seize to the Field, and it'll buff the important characters like 9, etc. to more reasonable levels, and that is quite nice. It is really important, as the class 0 cadets, you require so many of them on the field, so you kind of need to keep the characters cheap to be able to afford as many characters as possible. And that is extremely apparent, especially on cards like this Queen. When you play Queen to the field, you get to dull a character. But if you have 5 or more job class 0 cadet forwards, including Queen, you get to break that character instead. That is absolutely amazing. So Queen is able to break a character on play for 2, and you get a character for it. That is possibly the strongest effect in the entire game. But how do you get 5 class 0 cadet forwards onto the field when they are like 4 to 7k power? I've honestly no clue. All the same, you have a chance at doing that, and that is incredible. There is a theoretical possibility that you are going to get this effect off, and many decks, for example, like Earth, Wind, Water, don't really have that many ways to remove your characters, so it is actually relevant, to be honest. It could happen, and the Ace, for example, which is the next card, actually has a possibility to play multiple characters to the field. So you could see Queen's effect going off, and it's an EX burst, and that means it is a good card. Usually she'll just dull a character, but for 2 and giving you an extra class 0 cadet forward for your effects, for example, it isn't bad. So I'm going to play Queen in the deck just for the sheer possibility of having the cheapest 7 cost Odin in the entire game, and it's an EX burst. I think it's a fantastic card. Probably going to be something like 3 in most Type 0, 2 in most Type 0 decks, sorry. But why not having 3? I mean, it's an EX burst especially, so you're gonna see dulls, and once every other game you're going to break something with it, and that is a fantastic possibility. Then we get to Ace, which in my opinion is one of the best cards. Ace has the ability, or when he enters the field even, so it doesn't have to be played from hand, for example, but when he enters the field, you may play 1 job class 0 cadet forward from your hand to the field. So it's a little bit like X-Death, for example. When he breaks, you get to pick up a job class 0 cadet forward from the break zone, other than Ace, to your hand. So it cannot loop itself up to hand, for example, but it can pick up, for example, 9, which is fantastic, or any of the other job class 0 cadet forwards. And as they have special, this is very important, so that kind of makes Ace into an extremely cheap and efficient card. It is generally going to be 8k and give you a 8 or 9 sent for free from hand to field on play. So that is fantastic, and it's going to, when it breaks anyway, net you an extra cadet forward back to hand. Very nice character indeed. So I think Ace is incredible. Downside is that you probably have to play 2 or 3 of him just to have more class 0 cadet forwards. And yeah, that is a problem because it is a light card, for example. It is going to clog you at sometimes, but on the other hand it isn't so bad. You can chump block with him when needed and you get a free character back to hand and 9 to win, for example, anything. So I think Ace is fantastic, and when you play Ace and get a free 9 to field, it feels incredible. So I think Ace is fine and is going to see a fair bit of play. And 9 is a very fine new character, 8k in size, and it gains 1k power. Oh, sorry, it can give it away, so it's a bit like Waka. For each type 0 cadet forward you control, or job class 0 cadet forward you control, you get to give one forward you control 1k power. So I think that is very nice indeed. So it's a bit like Waka, being able to distribute power to smaller characters, for example Cease or Queen, but is usually going to give himself the power to be able to swing through for damage, even if the opponent have many like 8 or 9k characters. So 9 is an amazing forward power. It's like a battering ram, and it has a built-in win condition, Primal Roar, which is special and discard 2 lightning cards or like 4 backups or a combination of the 2. All forwards cannot block this turn, and that is amazing. So 9 is an incredible character. Very, very nice indeed. I'm going to play 9 even outside of type 0 decks. I'm going to play it in my normal lightning decks, because with a 3-cost Lulu, 9 always swings for 10 because it counts itself. So when it attacks, it buffs himself with plus 1k power, and Lulu gives it 1k power, so he swings for 10. And has a built-in win condition, which basically says nothing can block this turn. It's a fantastic card. I think 9 is incredible, and it's going to see a lot of play going forward. Giving Lightning another win condition is absolutely amazing. So my deck currently has 2 win conditions, which is 9 and Rinoa, both being incredibly good and quite difficult to counter. They are absolutely fantastic. So I think 9 is the best card, and it's also the best target for Ace. So when you play Ace, you want to play a free 9 to the field. Absolutely amazing card. Then we get to 7, which is one of the more interesting cards. When you play 7, all forwards of cost 4 or more that the opponent controls cannot block. And that is really interesting, because when your job class 0 cadet forward swings, they're going to be able to swing through for damage, and only their cheap small cards can actually block. And that is really interesting. Just be really careful, because what can happen is that they remove 7 and then just block your characters normally. And this is a 4k character we're talking about, so it's not exactly going to be very safe of a play. On the other hand, 7 is amazing. You just play 7 for 2 down to the field, and you have the ability to just run past your opponent's cards, and that is really something worth mentioning. And it is a 2 cost, which means of course that it could be used for Golbez, and it has a special, like all the other type 0 cards, has a special that says choose one special or auto ability and cancel its effect. And that is absolutely massive. This is the first card in the entire game that can stop an auto ability and just about this, yeah, and special ability. So, well, it cancels the effect, so it kind of still resolves, but the entire effect, so that everything after the colon is kind of nullified as just blank. So nothing really happens. And that is really interesting. That means the ability fizzles and nothing happens on resolution, which is absolutely huge, because you could stop Shantoto, for example, you could stop Omnislash, you could stop 9's special ability, you could stop any interesting ability you'd want to. You can stop Cloud of Darkness from clearing your 5 type 0 cadet forwards. Oh, there are so many good ways to do this, but this is one of the most interesting special abilities in the entire game at the moment. So I think it is definitely worth mentioning. And 7 also has a problem, of course. It is a 4k character. everything and their grandparents remove this card by just looking at it. So try to not sneeze or 7 is going to the break zone, because that's how quickly it goes. It just disappears. Really frustrating to keep all of these small characters on the field somehow. Keeping Queen, 7, 8 and C's alive is going to be very difficult. Fortunately, we have a character with some sustenance here, and as well as being very cheap to play. So when 8 enters the field, you can choose up to 3 job class 0 cadet characters you control and activate them. So that means it basically can be played for free if you'd have 3 job class 0 cadet backups, or you can make like a combination of the two. So you swing with 2 forwards, play 8 to the field later to be able to reactivate 2 of your forwards as well as 1 backup, for example. Very flexible card, and just doing that is amazing because you can swing out with 9, for example, your strongest character, as well as blocking with him later. Because you played 8, you can just reactivate 9, so that is fantastic. Also, there is a special here which kind of makes him very difficult to remove, because when you activate his special, which just costs like a copy of 8, as well as 1 wind CP, during this turn 8 cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, and the next damage dealt to him becomes 0 instead. So any burn, for example, or any summon or ability just cannot really deal with 8, and that is amazing. It is really a good card, and you could use it to block and then stop the damage dealt. You can block like an entire party on its own. It survives Bahamut, anything. Overall, it's just a really interesting card, 8. Being untargetable, being cheap to play, this is absolutely what Type 0 needs. So I think 8 is a top tier card, and every single Type 0 deck going forward is going to bring 8 along, because it is absolutely amazing. So across these 6 characters, I think C's, 9, Ace and 8 are the good ones. Queen and 7 are just sort of for filling this like the spots and giving tempo plays, so you're able to run underneath anything cost 4 or more with 7, and Queen gets you to dull a character. They also have like cool gimmicky things, 7 being able to stop like a special or auto ability, and Queen being able to break something if you'd happen to somehow have been able to have 5 characters out at the same time. Really cool, actually. It's not gonna happen a whole lot, but it could happen, and that is worth exploring. So I think the good ones are the ones on the side, and the Queen and 7 down the middle are kind of filling out the slots for now. At the moment, we're really struggling for good forward cards among the Type 0 cards, and we're really looking for some like big defender type of card, or more attackers in the mid size. Something more like 7 or 8k perhaps, maybe a 9k, maybe something that is good at blocking, for example, or a card with burn. We're really struggling here for some sort of good forward power that stays on the field. And that is quite frustrating, because the deck really needs to have many forwards out, so that is a problem. When you are up against lightning, when you play like C's, Queen or 7 to the field, they're just immediately going to be removed by an on-play effect, for example, and that is really frustrating. The moment you play 8, they play their Seymour or similar. When you play 9, there flies an Odin. You're never going to have many characters out, and that is really frustrating. But on the other hand, they are kind of cheap to play, and some of them can stop like special or auto abilities in a pinch. 8 could use a special to survive an extra turn. You could possibly do something to live a little bit longer, but still it's going to be very difficult. So at the moment I don't think the Type 0 deck is very good, but we're going to see like a lot of characters added to the deck, and that is where it gets interesting. The new summon for the Type 0s is the Diablos. Diablos is actually quite cool. You choose a forward and deal it 1000 damage for each character you control. It's like added together to a single source, so Minwu doesn't stop it if it's lethal. But if you control a jobs class 0 cadet forward, select up to 3 backups you control and activate them. And this is an EX burst, so this could net you like free backup activations as well as a break. And keep in mind, this is for each character you control, so this isn't type 0, this is each character. So when you're at 4 or 5 backups and have a couple of forwards out, this is going to be something like, well, 8 to 10k potentially for free, and that is quite good. So that is really interesting. And keep in mind, this can activate specific backups, so you can sort of activate Deuce or Aerith, for example, to use it a second time or similar, or use Kefka again. There could be all sorts of combinations available here, but Wind really needed extra removal, so I think Diablos is quite okay. And then we get to the new backups of the set. Type 0 getting a fair few decent ones here. A 3 cost class 0 Cadet forward booster here, and giving them all 1k. That is quite nice. So the Moogle here is actually pretty solid. I definitely like the Moogle, and I'm going to play that in the Type 0 deck for sure. But it is a very standard card. It is a little bit like Maria, and if you add Maria instead, for just 1 more CP, you can boost any character instead of just type 0. So it isn't that special, but it is a good card all the same. You could also run Moogle and Maria, which is also interesting, so giving them some beef. You really need them to stay durable and on the field, because if they are removed, your strategy just falls apart. You really need several of these type 0s, or else it's just going to break. Then we have Deuce. Deuce being quite an okay card. You choose one attacking forward and deal it 2k damage. That is not so much. 2k damage is usually irrelevant. It can be used, for example, to damage a card, so you can break it with Opus 1 Black Mage. Overall, maybe like assist the first striker, so it's able to go lethal on its target before it's being hit back. There are a couple of ways that this can actually be relevant. You can also damage a card so it breaks, like your small Dragoon kills it, for example. Overall, it is a decent card. It isn't bad at all, but it isn't special, so it becomes a problem. If they combat trick, for example, and survive with 1 or 2k, you can just finish it off with the last 2k there, because just after the combat takes place, you have a small window to act where the character still counts as attacking before you go back to attack preparation step. So if they, for example, use Golem and live with 1k left, you can finish it off with Deuce. Overall, it is quite a fine character, but where the good part comes in is this Concerto. It is a special. You pay 1 wind CP and dull Deuce, so you can't use it the turn it's played. But this special deals 4k damage to a card, to a forward, for each job class 0 Cadet forward you control. It is also added to a single source, so Minwu doesn't stop it if it's like enough to break it. But 4k for each job class 0 Cadet forward is immense. It is absolutely huge, so this is a really great card. I think this is going to see a lot of play, and as long as you have like a couple of the job class 0 Cadet forwards, it is actually going to be incredible. You don't need like 6 forwards out dealing 24k damage. That's not required. In general, you're going to have something like 3 job class 0 Cadet forwards out. And if you do, you're kind of safe in using this, because then you deal 12k damage with a special. And that is immense, actually. Dealing 12k damage, there are very few things that survives that. And that is really interesting. So bait a Golem, for example, or bait a removal, bait something, anything, and then just burn 12k. And that is incredible. And keep in mind that Deuce is really important, as it's a class 0 Cadet backup, so it gives some of these cards synergies. And every dupe you draw, every duplicate card you draw of Deuce isn't a dead card here. It is used to go lethal on something. You deal something like 8 to 12k damage on average with this card. And that is incredible for the low cost of it. And that is really, really important. It can't be used to deal with Emperor, but we have other ways to do that. We run Lightning. They are the best way of killing Emperor, so it shouldn't be a problem. Then we get to Rem. Isn't a special card yet. Right now it's a Sage with an EX burst, sort of, and that is fantastic. I mean, it is an amazing card. The difference between Sage and this one is that this one can actually pick up Diablos. Can I pick up Diablos? No, it can't pick up Diablos. Yeah, it can actually. Type 0 card, so it can pick up Diablos. But where it really gets important is when Rem enters the field, you can pick a category type 0 card up to hand from your break zone, so you can recycle summons, backups and forwards, and that is a fantastic thing to do. Being able to pick up the new Odin that is going to come. The Odin is 4 cost and states that if you have a type 0 cards, choose a character, break it, else it just breaks things up to like 7k power. Absolutely an amazing card. So Rem is going to be incredible, but right now there isn't really a good target for it that warrants kind of the 4 cost. The EX burst is arguable, you could use that, but right now I'd probably just include a Sage or 2 if I really felt the need to recycle something, as I have so many non-type 0 cards. But Rem isn't bad, and if you like the EX burst and the possibility to pick up, for example, Diablos, it is actually quite decent. I'm not in love with the card and I'm not impressed yet, but in Opus 3, when the amount of choices are increased, is just going to grow in power. So I think it is quite useful, and I'd consider running 2, but I'm really low on backup space at the moment. It is a class 0 cadet backup though, so that is really important as well. Filling out your characters with something that, for example, 8 can reactivate with its on-play effect is quite nice. Increasing the power reduction Cease does with its on-attack, it is quite useful to be honest, so it is very nice. Then we have the Arisha al-Rasha. That is a tongue-tire of name, but it is basically the tutor for this set, so it is really important and kind of binds this together. It can only search 4, which is kind of a pity, but I'm not surprised most searchers are like this. It's an incredible card overall, and it's sort of a pseudo 1 cost because you only pay 1 cost effectively, because you trade your card, your worst card on hand, for a type 0 forward, and that is really incredible. I think these tutors are really important, and I always have like 2 or 3 of these in the deck. But what do we really add to this deck to actually make it work? We're gonna have to change a lot of things. And firstly, what you're gonna do is you actually fill out some of these 2-0s. You can't have 2 7s, you can't have 2 of the 8, you really need 3 of these cards to be able to do anything at all. So increase most of these class 0 cadet forwards up to 3. I'd drop 1 Rem, I think. It is good, but I don't want to be clogged by it. I have no ways of breaking it at the moment, so I probably run at the most 2 of those at the moment. But we have so many options here. So let's start with the summons. I think the most important thing to add to this deck is removal, because we don't have straight up removal much. We have several different sources of burn that we can use, so let's remove some of these, for example the Ramu and stuff like that. Just remove all of those. Keep Cyclops, add Odin, and in my opinion Asura. Asura is the most flexible summon in the entire game. It is going to save you from so many things, and it is going to pick up the cards you need. It picks up 2 cost Aerith back to hand. It picks up all of these cards back to hand that you need. So 7, Deuce, Aerith, all of these cards. It is amazing. It is absolutely an amazing card, and you have the possibility to increase your CP, ramping for a turn, so you just reactivate all backups, use that CP again for winning, things like that. Reactivating forwards, you're able to swing out while still being able to defend. Overall, it's an immense card. So summons, I think Cyclops, 4-cost Odin, and Asura are good alternatives. But we have so many different things we could add. We have 2 archetypes we could add to the deck, for example, and that is the Riku Pain, for example. That isn't bad. I think it takes up a little bit too much deck space, but it is a possibility. So Riku Pain and Bart could be a thing. It isn't bad at all. I'd also consider a couple of these other options here, and Bart's, Nono, and Gertie makes for a very interesting choice here. Gertie, Nono, and Bart's, 3 Mughals in this case. Bart's is also a type 0, so keep in mind we're not screwing about with adding forwards that aren't out of the category, for example. Bart's is still a class 0 cadet forward for most intents and purposes while he's on the field. He's just a wanderer outside of the field, but on the field he is a synergy card for most of the effects here, and that is very nice. So Bart gets synergy and boost from the Moogle, for example, that gives 1k to the class 0 cadet forwards. and that is nice. He can't be searched by Al Rasha, for example, but is still a very nice card. So I think Bards makes sense running here. If we add Nono, well, people value Astrologian well. If people value Astrologian so highly, how come they don't value Nono? So Nono makes a lot of sense running. You can reactivate how many cards you want. It is an absolutely, really a great card. And then we have Gertie, which is really interesting. People value the Earth Monk so highly. And here we have a card that you can just discard any lightning card, and we deal 2 to 4k power reduction to the chosen forward. And that is really, really powerful in my opinion. Just being able to say that I always have a combat trick. Every turn now for the rest of the game, you have to respect the fact that I can reactivate like 3 forwards or reduce your power by 3k on demand with any card. It isn't like a specific summon that you can see in your opponent's discard, for example. It is any lightning card can be used with Gertie, and any wind card can be used with Nono. So that is fantastic. Being able to have those 2 tricks there is really something, and it's not taking too much deck space. On the other hand, you can skip Gertie and go with the Red Mage for haste. You can skip the Nono and go with Archer for clearing out Minwu or plus 1k backups. That is also relevant. So there are other options, but I think the Moogle package is definitely something you should try, because winning with Moogles is a very good feeling. And you have like 4 Moogles in this deck. That is nice. Then we have a couple of other choices here. We could go with Maria in the bottom left corner, for example, to increase power on all of the type zeros with another 1k. Very relevant, as it is hard enough to keep them on the field already. Maria definitely increasing the value out of each play for the rest of the game, and we just paid 4 for it. It isn't bad at all. It's just 1 more than the Moogle thingy that increases only the class hero cadet forwards. So I definitely think that is a good option. And since we're playing Lightning, I think Al Cid is definitely something you should consider at the very least. It is one of the best cards in the entire game, although it takes a lot of deck space. Keep in mind though, Al Cid can toss out, for example, the Lightning 2 cost class 0 cadet forward to the field, so there are some synergies here, but not immense exactly. But since we're playing Lightning, it is Al Cid possibility right here, so it isn't bad. When we go to the bottom right corner, there are the 10 out of 10 cards. Aerith is absolutely amazing. It is the best card in game in my opinion. Free to play and being able to reactivate specific backups instead, so very nice play there. And her special is one of the best in the entire game, reactivating everything and making everything, we call it unchoosable, so that is absolutely fantastic. Aerith being one of the best things in the entire game, and Asura picks up the 2 cost Aerith, and well, being able to recycle the best special in the entire game, and Deuce, and Seven, and Cease. So, I mean, there are so many things recyclable by Asura, so it just makes sense running a 2 cost Aerith to be able to pick that up as well. Very nice indeed. And then we have Seymour, which I think is really important because of cards like Ashe, for example. Ashe and Delita being 2 amazing targets for Seymour. You really hurt your opponent by removing that card, which normally is one of the counters to your deck, sort of. Delita being a big forward in general, and Ashe generally being able to, difficult to kill, so Seymour really punishing it there. So these are some choices I've considered adding to my Type 0 deck. I went with the Moogle package for now, with Bards, Nono and Gertie, because I think it's a lot of fun. And the bottom right pile of cards as well with Aerith, Seymour. I also added Asura and Odin. I've not added Ricky Payne Bards or Maria at the moment. I think they take up a little bit too much deck space, and I want to keep it kind of gimmicky and very Type 0-y for now. That's what I added right now, and I'm really enjoying the deck and really performing. To some point at the very least. It falls apart sometimes because a good opponent will not allow you to get like a field of 7 or similar, so Type 0 is quite easily punished by that, but in general it's still kind of fun. And then we have the Golbez. I mean, there are so many of these cards that cost 2, like we said with Asura, And since they cost 2 and are so good, I think we're gonna see someone running a Wind Lightning Golbez eventually. I think I've seen someone already doing it, but not heard of results yet. So I would be very intrigued to hear someone trying out this kind of deck, but with Golbez instead, to be able to get several Type Zeros out for cheap. I think that's a fantastic play. Like, even if you don't have many targets for Golbez, just the sheer possibility of having a forward that lightning cannot break without like countering it in some way first. So they'd have to use something like status reels before breaking, or bouncing it instead of breaking it, maybe dulling it and running past it instead. It is just a mess for a lightning player to deal with the Golbez for the rest of the game, and if they break it, you get like 3 or 4 characters in general out. Filling your deck with like 10 or 15 2-costs, there's no point to that. I think it's perfectly fine to just have a couple of extra targets for Golbez and running some synergetic kind of in-color 2-cost as well. So running a Cease and 7, for example, as the in-color 2-costs, and maybe a Sedan for flavor, and then adding some fun 2-cost from other colors. Maybe Haste, for example, with Tifa. I don't know what you want, but some sort of good one just to be able to go with that. And then use the Cyclops to make sure your actual cards are still relevant. And I mean, the Golbez could work. I can definitely see that happening, and there are just going to be more 2-cost released here, so the Type Zeros are interesting for this purpose. And all of those 2-costs, by the way, have good specials nearly, so I think it's just fantastic. Go with Golbez, try it out, see what happens, and tell me about it, because I think Golbez is interesting. The Category 9 deck, I'm not as pleased with that one. I felt it was quite boring, but there are some fantastic cards added here that really changes the meta as we know it, I think. This is the deck anyway, and we have a bunch of 2-costs, 2-ofs once again, and the unique starter cards here is Sedan, Vivi, and Garnet. So these are the unique cards. The rest are available in Opus 1, 2, or 3. So not Opus 3 yet, of course, but soon. The new forwards for this starter set was Seidane, an extremely flexible and cheap forward, which you can usually in a Category 9 deck at the very least play for 2, which makes it extremely efficient. There are just so many possible plays with Seidane that it becomes extremely flexible and frustrating for your opponent to play around it. Compare him to Argath, for example. Argath is a 2-cost, 3k, your opponent has to discard a card. This one is a 2-cost 7k, where your opponent has to discard a card, or you get to draw a card, or you reactivate all Category 9 characters you control. So it's extremely flexible. I love Seidane for so many reasons. It is absolutely fantastic to play. I can see myself running Seidane in any deck with a couple of Category 9 characters at the very least. So I think Seidane is good. And it's going to be interesting to see how many Category 9 forwards are added that synergize with Seidane, as I need one out to play Seidane, kind of. So I need something like Vivi to the field first and then Seidane. But there are many ways to do it, and early Garnet, for example, is interesting. So there are many ways to do it. So I'd rank Seidane as one of the top tier cards, but on the other hand, it is a light character, which is really frustrating. So that can be annoying. If you really want an Emperor, you're not really going to run Seidane anyway. Then we have Vivi. Vivi is a very good card, really performing at the moment and able to remove anything up to 8k for just removing Vivi and paying a fire card or 2 fire backups. Very powerful card indeed. So I really like Vivi, and playing Vivi for 2, even on the first turn, and just stating to your opponent that you're in for trouble if you play a forward with 8k or less. I'm just going to remove it when I want to. So that is really interesting. It is instant speed as well. It is a tap ability, so you can always use it. You can just immediately play Vivi, break it, and deal 8k if you want to. Then we get to Garnet. Garnet is actually more relevant in my opinion. When she enters the field, you can search your deck for a water summon of cost 2 or less and cast it without paying its cost. So I usually go for a Moogle. In the early game, a Moogle is absolutely fantastic as you get to cycle through more cards, because in a card game, if you get the right cards, you win. And that is the best way to do it. So just tap a backup, discard a card, play Garnet, play Moogle, draw 2 cards, discard 1 card, and overall that play became extremely cheap. So Garnet is quite nice, but on the other hand, it's just a 5k card, so it's not going to do that much. Amaranth is the next card. It is a 5 cost 9k character, which isn't too bad, so you don't expect it to do too much. But the ability is absolutely fantastic, and we're gonna see some interesting people making some interesting decks out of this card, I can just tell you that. There are extreme synergies with Amaranth. For example, cards like Kefka becomes incredible. If you use Kefka on your 1 or 2 cost character, it becomes something like 8 to 11,000, and then you just tap Amaranth to break one of your opponent's characters. It just goes down. 11k is extremely much damage. And even more interesting is the fact that just having Amaranth means that the opponent cannot really go plus on breaking your characters, because if they use Odin on Warrior of Light, for example, you can immediately use Amaranth to break your own Warrior of Light, or sorry, put it into the break zone, I mean, and use that as a burn to deal with the opponent's card. So your opponent paid for an Odin, they broke one of your cards kind of, but lost one of their own cards as well, so they actually lost on that trade. So just having Amaranth means that the opponent cannot really use expensive combat tricks to win. They cannot really use, for example, expensive removal. If they use special, they must be prepared that I just break that character myself and break one of your other guys on it. Overall, Amaranth is just amazing. So that is really, really, really interesting. So keep in mind that there are so many ways to use Amaranth. So if they use an expensive combat trick, for example using Vincent on your Cecil or something, you can always just choose to break Cecil yourself and deal 9 or 10k to one of their characters. So just having this sheer possibility makes Amaranth into a fantastic card, in my opinion. I value it very highly, and cards with drawbacks, for example, like, I don't know, Dark Knights, something like that, but high power becomes really, really, really useful. Cards like Ash, for example, that can randomly increase in power if targeted, can also be used with Amaranth's effect. Just put Ash into the break zone after they've used like Kate Sith on it, and suddenly it's a huge blast. There are just so many ways to use Amaranth that I just cannot seeing it being a very bad card. The turn it is played, of course, it isn't going to do a whole lot, but that's the same with most cards. So just having the possibility of breaking your own character for profit in this way, especially when they pay for breaking it, makes a lot of sense. We have Steiner as well. Steiner is quite cool. When Steiner enters the field, you may search for one category 9 character and add it to your hand. So it searches all kinds of deck here. If you control a category 9 character other than Steiner, Steiner gains 1k power. It isn't a very big card. Steiner is not going to be your primary beater and things like that, but I'd value it as something like a 2 or 3 cost card. And keep in mind it's an EX burst, and you get to search for a category 9 character, so you can guarantee, for example, a backup character or similar. So Steiner is nice. I definitely recommend trying out Steiner in the category 9 decks, as it gives you consistency in finding backup and key characters that you need at any point. It can guarantee an Artemicion back to hand, so for example, so you can just bottom deck whatever you needed, for example, or do any key function for your deck, sort of. Very nice indeed. We have Kina, who is kind of a troll card. For each card you have in your hand, Kina gets 1k power. In the start of turn, you can often sit with 6 or 7 cards, so I think that is quite good. But there's also a problem, because when you go low on cards, Kina becomes extremely bad. And also, when you sort of have to use combat tricks to save Kina, she drops in power because you lost cards. So that is also a problem. I don't think Kina is very special. But her Eat special ability, choose a forward your opponent controls that has been dealt damage this turn. If that forward has a special ability or action ability, break it. So that is really interesting. So any cheap source of damage and one copy of Kina means a break. I don't really know because it's not so special, and it's sort of a 2-stage combo. First damage, then break, but it's still a reasonably good card, and you could trade quite well with this. Overall, the Kina isn't very good. I'm not quite keen on it, and it is just overall, I don't know, really frustrating, and having to first deal damage to it means Minwu stops it in its entirety. Overall, I don't think Kina will see a lot of play. Out of these fancy like new category 9 characters, I'm really hyped up about Vivi, Amaranth and Garnet. They makes a lot of sense running, and taking Steiner mostly for its EX effect, but also for giving some consistency in searching out, for example, 2 ofs among your, or 1 ofs even, among your category 9 characters. And just sort of guaranteeing that you get it. You get it when you want it, and that is quite cool. There were a couple of new backups for this starter set, and the black walls for category 9 was quite okay. It is a, when it enters the field, EX burst, keep that in mind, choose one forward the opponent controls and deal 3k damage and 1k more damage for each card in your opponent's hand. So that could be quite relevant, lightning decks or control decks in general, keeping quite a large hand size. Keep in mind though that the opponent could just choose to spend cards, an Odin from hand, to break one of your characters, thus losing 3 cards from hand, but not losing anything on your black walls because it suddenly was not able to break anything anymore. So there are counterplays to black walls, and that is kind of frustrating, and also keeping a low hand size kind of removes the entire point of black walls. So against tempo decks it's not gonna do that much, but on the other hand it breaks small characters like the one cost Yuffie, one cost Snow, cards like that, though generally not very relevant. So I don't think black walls is that good of a character in my opinion. It is generally going to be a 5k plus burn, so there are points where this is absolutely great, and this, as it's an EX burst, it could be relevant. So I mean, if you like it and don't mind the fact that it's usually going to be something like a 5k burn, and the opponent having the possibility of just discarding a card for a summon, for example, and stopping it in its entirety, go ahead. The EX effect though is quite powerful because that offers no counterplay, and that is quite okay. So I think the black walls too, depending on the deck, but as it's unique, you can only have 1 on the field. I think it's something like a 2 of in most fire decks. It is often better than Irvine, and being able to use it as an EX burst simply is quite powerful. So I think black walls may see some play as something like a 1 of or 2 of in decks. If you have played one, it's a dead card, so I mean it's quite frustrating, but the EX saves that a little bit. Echo on the other hand is absolutely great. Echo not only synergizes really well with the Mog on the far right, which you'll see later, it searches the category 9 forwards and adds them to hand, which is absolutely great. You should usually have like 1 or 2 of these, like tutors they call them, in your deck all the time, because you can throw away your worst card, tap a backup, and just search for what you want with Echo, and that is fantastic. So I think searchers are very important for this format at the moment. It gives consistency because this can search Steiner, which could find, for example, the Artemicion if you really need to bottom deck an Emperor or something, and just put it there. So I think the possibility is amazing. Tutors are really powerful at the moment and very cheap to play. You can even play them while keeping tempo up, so I think that is very important. Artemicion is a new Moogle. It is a Moogle, and that is important to keep in mind. Could be useful sometimes, and you could make a Moogle deck or similar with it. Very nice indeed. It is a category 9 character, very important as well for the synergies. Not that there are very many backups, but there are a couple. When Artemicion enters the field, place any number of cards from your hand to the bottom of the deck in any order you want to. So you can stack the bottom of your deck and draw that many cards. as you put in the bottom of the deck. So basically it's almost like a free mulligan, but you get to keep the good cards. So Artemicion is ridiculously strong. In all water decks going forward, I am going to play at the very least 2 Artemicion. Unless I get to some odd sticky situation where I need like synergy cards like Type 0 or similar, and just can't make a space for Artemicion, I might not play it. But in all other water decks going forward, I'm always going to include an Artemicion because it's such an extremely good ability. There's always going to be that card in your hand, like a 7-cost Odin, or something like a Dark Emperor, an extra Dark Emperor. You had 2 on your hand, for example. You just need to bottom deck that. Just put it into the bottom of the deck, draw a new card, go through your deck faster, stack the bottom of your deck. You'll have like 8-9 cards in the bottom of your deck that you know exactly what they are, and that means you can have an easier time calculating the probability of your draws coming turns. When you have like 20 cards left in your deck and you know what the bottom 8 cards are, that's a huge advantage for you. So that is really nice. I think Artemicion is not to be underestimated. I think it's one of the best backups in the entire game, and it is one of the best first turn backups in the entire game, because you can fix your hand immediately. Just discard a card for Artemicion, play Artemicion to the field, just throw away all of those like 5-cost characters to the bottom of the deck, or any like dupe of a character you don't want at the moment, any dark cards you don't need at the moment. Just put it in the bottom deck and then shuffle later. Put Odin back into the deck immediately that you had to start with on your hand, for example. Summons that aren't so relevant in the beginning, just throw them back for now. It is extremely powerful. I can't stress enough how good Artemicion is at the moment. It definitely should be run, I think, in all water decks right now. Then we have the Mog, which offers synergy to Echo. So if you have played Echo, you can play a Mog 9, I think it's called, for free. It's very cheap indeed. When Mog 9 enters the field, if you control card name Echo, draw 1 card. So that is incredible. It means it's a 1-cost backup sort of. You cycle through your deck faster, which is kind of nice. And it has an ability as well, so it's a 1-cost backup, and you can pay 3 CP and tap this card and put it into the break zone to choose 1 forward and bounce it to the opponent's hand. I mean, having a removal like this is really good, and I don't mind that. It is also a Moogle, and it is cheap to play, so I think there are several reasons you could run this, but overall it's not fantastic. But having a removal readily available on the field all the time, that is quite cool. The problem, I think, is that water kind of struggles with Emperor because it has so few ways to actually break and remove it from the game, the Emperor. It can usually bounce it once or twice, but this is countered by Emperor as well, so there is some problems with it, and I don't really like bounce in general, but there are tempo plays here available. You just, for example, in the late game, you could just use this, and fine, why not? Throw a dupe or a dead card from hand, tap a backup and this Mog, remove it, and bam! Then you can replay another for just 1 CP. Overall, quite a decent play. So overall, these backups were quite good, and I think Echo and Artemicion will see a lot of play. And because Echo's seen play, we might see a Mog 9 or 3 being played at some point, but I think people will just skip over that and go to the good cards instead. Yuna, for example, giving an immediate bounce, usually better than having this. I suppose Mog is better as a second turn play, but overall I'm not very interested in that card at all, so I'll probably go for Echo and Artemicion going forward. Black Waltz might see some play, probably as a 1 or 2 of maybe. It is better than Irvine strictly in my opinion, but it is not very special. I don't like small burns, that is probably the main reason. Overall, the category 9 starter deck is not much to use in my opinion. I think it is very bad. The cost curve is bad, you have many cards, you easily get to 5 backups, and all your characters are super cheap to play, so many like 2 costs and things. It doesn't build any good numbers, and I think the Type 0 one has a little bit more fun. The only good card here is Vivi and Amaranth in my opinion. All of the other cards just gives like consistency. You always can play cards, You always can do this and that, but they don't lead to a victory directly. You need win conditions to win. There is no 9 here, for example. These kind of cards are what we're lacking. So the problem with this deck mostly is that we need to swap out so many cards because they're nearly all of them are bad. So we'll keep some of the key characters like Vivi and Amaranth. And Garnet, Steiner, Artemicion, Echo, Mog, Fairy, cards like that are pretty good, and I think we'll keep the Moogle as well because of Garnet, so that is a good idea. But we're probably gonna remove most of them, and the problem is that there are just so many good water and fire cards at the moment. All of these cards are of the top tier in my opinion, and there's absolutely no reason not to run these instead. Overall, the category 9 cards are interesting though. There are searchers and synergies for them, so definitely experiment with them, but don't for a moment expect that category 9 is going to topple the meta at the moment, because I think Amaranth is better used outside of this color combination at the moment. For example, with power boosts to low cost curve characters, for example, things like that. I don't think Fire and Water has the best synergy, as they kind of both struggle with direct removal, have to resort to, for example, Bahamut and similar. Overall, I think the color combination works better with the old cards in Opus 1 and 2. For example, Sunday and Ash and Tifa being absolutely amazing forwards. There are no reason not to run them if running this color combination. Yuna, Astrologian and Minwu just makes a lot more sense than all of this rubbish. I'd probably run Artemicion though, but I'd consider dropping Mog 9. So I rate this deck kind of low and don't expect to see it much. But that is it for today's Makoreactor Meta Monday. So we went quickly through these Final Fantasy IX and Type 0 starters, and I think I got to the conclusion that I don't think these are very competitive at the moment. They are gimmicky and have some nice interactions that definitely can be built upon, but currently I think it's better to pick out 9 from the Type 0s, for example, and play it in the Ice Lightning. That is kind of cool, and I think it's better to just pick out Diablos and play it in the standard wind kind of decks, maybe with some sort of tech from the Type 0s, but not much more than that. There are just like few interactions worth mentioning here, like the Golbez, for example, the 2 costs for Golbez. These are the kinds of things that the starters currently brought, and maybe Garnet will see some play in the water decks, Amaranth in Monofire. There are a bunch of cards, Vivi for example, maybe Ice Fire Tempo will run Vivi. There are a bunch of these cards, but overall we have to wait until Opus 3 to see just how competitive these will be, because we severely lacks good forwards for Type 0 at the moment. We only have Ace and 9 really, the rest are sort of fill out and gimmicky small targets that easily just falls apart. They cannot really block and they'll struggle to deal damage. Overall they are not very strong. The Final Fantasy IX are a little bit less so. On the other hand, the characters are generally rubbish. For example, Kina doesn't really work if you don't have a big hand, and yeah, there are so many problems with them that I'm not very interested at all. The best introduction in the FF9 was probably Artemicion, an amazing card. But overall, not very interesting. We're gonna see some splashes from the starter decks here and there, but we're probably not gonna see Type 0 winning out in the regionals anytime soon. Maybe we'll see like a Golbez Type 0 type of thing, but we'll have to wait until Opus 3 to really find out. So thank you for listening, and I'll hope you tune in next time. We're gonna try to do this like roughly every Monday, but some Monday might be missed, especially during summer vacations, because I'll be very busy, but I'll try to do my best. So thanks for listening and have a good time.